Sir, with your permission, I'll start with the next session.
Sir is audible now? Good evening, Pranam.
Shall I start with your permission?
Just a moment, Vidya. Nirupma. Now,
yeah.
Okay, Nirupma, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all in the second session of the day, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome our dearest and respected Professor Girisha Mishra, sir. Welcome, sir. Professor Girisha Mishra is the ex-Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi International Hindi University, Wardha, Gujarat. He was also the ex-HOD of the Department of Psychology, University of Delhi, renowned academician and a prolific writer and columnist. He was also dean for research for humanities and social science. Among his achievements, professional has also as president of the National Academy of Psychology. Sir is also as member and council for Psychology, Indian Council of Social Science Research. Areas of interest lies in social psychology, I'm so sorry, sir, because of it lies social psychology, human development, culture, and indigenous self and effective processes. So once again, I thank you for accepting the email on the topic.
Sir, I hope there is some connectivity issue.
Sir,
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay, so have you finished the introduction?
Sir, I'm so sorry. I think because of the internet connectivity, I think I missed some point. I'm so sorry.
Sir, now over to you.
Forget about that.
Over to
We are
you,
waiting
sir.
for.
Yeah, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for good words. I'm happy to learn that the issue of context was raised in the last lecture by Professor Purnima Singh, and she talked about social psychology. The topic that has been assigned to me is to focus on psychology in India and what are the future perspectives which are relevant to psychology in India. I would like to share some of the thoughts which relate to the development of psychology. And I have gathered those ideas while editing the 5th and 6th surveys of psychology in India, as well as my reading of the works which have been done in the Indian context. Friends, the expectations from psychology are very large. Society in general, as well as policymakers, have certain expectations, and psychology is expected to fulfill those expectations. When I'm going to talk about the emerging scenario and what are the future perspectives, I would like to draw upon my learning, which is based on the works that have been published, as well as my own interpretation of the developments in psychology in general. I would like to begin with some general remarks on the field of psychology, and I would like to begin with the observation that psychology has been engaged in its academic journey uh, with a single goal to create a scientific psychology which uh, emulates, which follows the principles uh, available in physical sciences, and perhaps the perfect science is called, physics. So you need to have principles like that. And it is also proposed that perhaps we will be able to make generalizations about behavior, about mental functions, and we have been trying to pursue it. Recently, I have come across some interesting articles about the current status of psychology and what is happening. Uh, and I will share those at least two articles by two great psychologists, and that may be circulated for wider reading among the participants. And they are eye openers. One of the article is by Smithland, a psychologist from Norway. He is professor at Oslo University, and he has been writing a lot about the theoretical foundations of psychology. And in one of his very recent papers published in perhaps in this month, March 2021, and he says that we have a lot of data, empirical studies, and he has given some number also of published papers. You can imagine the way publications are going on, more than million. And in science, we often come across certain laws. So we have a lot of data, but there is no law. In physical sciences, you have data and you have laws. We have a lot of data, but hardly we have any law. Have you come across? Recently, we have not heard much about that. Weber and Fechner, they started something, and that was considered inappropriate in the context of signal detection theory, information theory, and all those things are of just history. But the kind of development that has taken place is mind-boggling in terms of data and lack of systematic laws, principles that we can say that things work like this. It's not possible. He has made one more interesting observation. that in the course of methodological development, we have moved from individual to group average methodology. Most of our studies are based on group averages. That is the basic analysis in statistics which we use. You have a group, you have mean, standard deviation, you compare that with the other group and you draw certain conclusions, and so you want to reach to population. Individual is just missing, the person is just missing. It's a mythical individual which is being studied. That average may not be representing anyone. It is quite possible. Then, when we go to use of our methods, there are many questions which have been raised and many attempts have been made. And they indicate just one thing, that it is the communication which is very important. Communication between the researcher and the participant, and between participant and the researcher, the data you get and all that. And he says the most challenging part of that is trust in communication. If you don't have trust in communication, you will be getting data which has nothing to do with reality. So from individual to group level of analysis and drawing conclusions on the basis of that. And then there is a challenge pertaining to trust focused or trust related communication, whether communication has trust or not. If you don't have, you can't get access to the data. Then I have another paper which I will mail that to you, and I think people must read it. That in psychology, we deal with a large number of constructs, concepts. In any area, if you go, you will find you have a variety of constructs. For example, you have self-determination, self-efficacy, self-control, self-esteem, and I can mention about 70 such terms where self is used as an epithet. Self-enhancement. There are so many terms which are there with self. Now, think about it. All these terms are actually creations of the phenomenology. Researcher thinks, speculates. Of course, he finds something outside which triggers his attention, and he thinks that the earlier concept is inadequate, so you need a different concept. Again, you need a different concept. One term which has been used by a historian of psychology, that psychology has moving targets. Moving targets. You have a target which is always moving, which is in transition. The most important property of behavior is that it changes. It changes from moment to moment. It is transitory. You can't fix it. You try to fix it with numbers, you allot a number to that and you think that I have fixed it, but it has not been fixed. The same individual may come to you and tell, oh, I have just faked all the responses. What to do? So it's always moving, changing target. And the context is also changing. And the meaning of a particular behavior also changes with context. It can be individual's personal context or community context, or you can go to the level of culture and try to understand that. So without taking context into account, you can't explain any behavior, any concept. Now, we have many terms: response, behavior, action, and it depends on our own specific meaning that we attach to these terms and how we interpret these terms, how we utilize these terms. One of the psychologists, her name is Barrett. She works in neuropsychology and she calls herself as a psychological constructionist. Psychological constructionism. She's one of the leading personalities in the area of emotion. And I've been following her work for a long time. And very impressive work she has done. In one of her recent presentations at the American Psychological Society, APS, not APA, this is another body. And that paper has been published. I will make that available to you. I'm just mentioning one or two points which she has brought for our consideration. She says that, remember what she is saying, very important distinction. Observer dependent concepts, categories, and observer independent constructs, categories. In physical sciences, we have observer independent things. The material doesn't change with the observer. But anger, hate, cooperation, name any psychological process, what is happening? They are observer dependent. They are not observer independent. Just you have given a number does not make that it is. No, it will not make it observer independent. You do it, and that is actually a false creation that you have done. In reality, it is a kind of a maya, a kind of construction that you have done. And it works. It is used in communication because there are people who are sharing it. You call it anger, and others also consider it anger because they live in a community life, and therefore it is considered as anger, different from love, which is defined and shared by people in a different way. But it is not observer independent. It's very crucial to recognize that most of our concepts are observer dependent. They are not observer independent. In natural sciences, things are observer independent. So, by a technology of statistics or doing methodology, you convert them into observer independent. कि चलो ये data है, it is motivation, it's intelligence, this is commitment, this is leadership, this is that. All of them are observer dependent. This must be recognized. Then she draws attention to another important challenge and very important. Well, there are two very difficult terms in psychology. One is mind and the other is brain. Brain is a physical structure available in your body, present in your body, and mind is normally considered as in terms of the various functions that you perform, your thinking, your learning, your emotion, your perception, all those things constitute mind. The two are interconnected. Now, Barrett says three things, very, very important. If you want to understand psychological processes, one is that there is external environment which provides certain stimulus, sensory stimulus, right? So sensory input is there which comes from environment. Then she says that there is something which comes from interoceptors, bodily sensations. When you say कि डर लग रहा है, oh, कहीं शिवरिंग भी होती है, मन में एक एंगर होता है, तो कैसे मन में, you know, your body has a feeling. Body also provides. It is different from the external environment. So there are sensations which emerge in your body. This is the second input you get. And third is your past experience that you have, which is available in terms of memory. So body provides you the feelings. Sensations come from external environment. And your brain provides cognition. You have certain ideas, certain experiences, certain thoughts, which are based on your personal past experience. So the outcome is actually result of the combination of external input, sensations, experiences which arise from body, as well as your past experience which is retained in your brain in terms of neural connections, their networks, and all that. All the three are combined, and they have to be understood clearly if you want to study behavior, action, or psychology in proper manner. How we are going to combine? We make certain errors. Initially, we made a distinction between observer independent categories and observer dependent categories. Now, there are categories which are observer dependent, but we naturalize them. We call them as observer independent. Once we have given the number, we think that, well, it is something concrete that we have. It's like physical object, we can do all the operations. And we do that. We draw conclusions. We don't take into account the role of bodily sensations, which are quite important in emotion, particularly the feelings that you have. Now, the neural pattern that you have, it provides past experience, and that input is integrated. That input is integrated. It is not causally related to the external thing. It is important to see how the three are interrelated, how they are integrated. That is most important. And the error of categorization should not be there. Well, Barrett's paper is quite complex. You need to read it twice or thrice. Then you will come up with understanding of her approach. These are the basic things which she raises. We often make mistake in, considering observer dependent as observer independent. You see, the whole problem is that our brain categorizes things. Cognition is basically categorization. Understanding is rooted in the way you categorize. Whatever you find, whatever input you get, you categorize it. Boy, girl, book, all these things. You see, this is a basic process that takes place. Now, Barrett talks about certain psychological primitives, which are not the things which are, equal to varied psychological constructs which are phenomenologically determined, are created. So she draws attention to lower than those complex phenomenological categories, some psychological notions which may be present, some primitive psychological categories. What are they? It has to be understood. It has to be analyzed and looked at. The simple understanding that we had SR connection or SOR connection, I think that kind of linear relationship that this leads to this, and you have an independent variable, you have a dependent variable. This situation is not an appropriate way to understand reality, as you have to integrate these three. So there is a demand coming from these studies and these researchers that psychology should be erased from the researches which are there, and the kind of linear progression that we have made is flawed in certain ways. Well, it does not mean that whatever has been done is useless, but it requires change. How that has to be done, it's the agenda for future. Many people are thinking about what should be the future agenda. In fact, in the last lecture, I did talk about the layers and different levels of, analysis which is there and how we can develop the connections. So, my reference to these ideas is simply to draw your attention to the fact that a lot of thinking is coming up which is challenging the accepted paradigm of doing psychology or understanding psychological constructs. So it's a kind of a threshold where we have reached. And how we are going to change, I think things will be very different. Of course, there is resistance and it takes time to follow new ideas and accept new ideas. Uh, and the thing is, as you know, that we live in a world which we have created. So we have defined what is hate and what is love and what is freedom and what is democracy. Right? And we try to follow them. And there are pressures from group, from community, from culture in which we live. And they appear to be something very concrete, indispensable. And if you don't follow, then you will be punished. You have created laws, you have code, IPC, and people get punishment if they don't follow those rules and all that. So all of them are constructed, shared, accepted, and that way it has achieved a privileged position and it dictates things and you can change it. But it again it requires politics, it requires many other things. It's a very complex thing. We have not paid much attention to these aspects. How the discipline grows, what are the concepts which become prominent. If you look at the cultural history of the development of psychology, you will notice that some concept becomes very dominant. The Gestalt psychology becomes dominant at one point of time. Humanistic psychology emerges, behaviorism emerges, psychoanalysis emerges. Now, all these things indicate multivocality, that there are many voices in psychology. At any point of time, you will see that there is no just one voice, because all of them refer to observer-dependent categories. So culture defines how to live, how to study, what to do, what not to do, your goals, your desires. All these things happen within that context which you have created. Now, with against this backdrop, let us consider what is happening in psychology in India. We have referred to several things earlier also. I will not go to the history. You will see that interestingly, the first survey of psychology was in one volume, second was in two volumes, third was in three volumes, and fourth was also in three volumes, fifth was in four volumes, and sixth is now in five volumes. Now, it is not merely the increase in number of studies. It also shows diversification in interest, focus in interest. Again, it is very selective. It doesn't incorporate everything. We have not created a good history of psychology, what has happened and how it has happened. There have been many kinds of foci of interest. And as we know that most of our teachers had their higher education and training in Western universities in North America, in British and in Canadian universities, in the other European countries, training was given to them. And usually the prototype of doing research or getting the concepts and theories, identifying the problems, psychology was adopted, right? The way it was being done, it is taken here. There was no questioning of the roots of those ideas. People did not bother about that. So we started different kinds of activities. I think most of our colleagues who are participating in this program must be aware of the name of McClelland, who is famous for his research on achievement motivation. Now, he wrote in 1964 a book called Achieving Society, and he presented the idea that America is achieving society. And there is, prosperity and achievement and progress and success and all that. So the idea was taken by others that achievement motivation must be increased. And if achievement motivation is increased, then accomplishment, achievement, success, performance will also increase. So achievement motivation is like an injection and you increase it. And they also showed that independence training is something basic to development of achievement motivation. So parents should be taught to inculcate achievement motive through independence training. All these ideas were presented and studies were reported and all that, very impressive. So McClelland came to India and there was a study of motivating fishermen in Kakinada. I think it is in Tamil Nadu perhaps. And there they conducted that field study, provided motivation training. And a book came written by McClelland and another professor. His name is David Winter. I had an opportunity to meet Winter in Michigan University when I was there in 91. So they conducted study here how to motivate these people, right? And they created interest in achievement motivation. Then McLaren shifted to power motivation and leadership and all that. So it provided one way to attack the problems and people accepted it. Now, one of our colleagues, a senior colleague, Professor J.B.P. Sinha, he was exploring that and he found that there is some problem with that. Achievement motivation may work in that context. It may not work in Indian context. And he did some studies, and the study was reported in Journal of Experimental Social Psychology. It was published. And he challenged the notion of an achievement and tried to see how it works differently. And that work was published, I think, I don't remember exactly, but in 70s, the work was published. At Allahabad, one of my students and myself, we became interested in this and we did a couple of studies and she did her PhD on that. That achievement striving may mean differently. It may not be an individualistic achievement. It may be achievement of family. There are many other issues. So what is the meaning of achievement? This was explored. And gradually we came to understand that you need to understand achievement in a cultural context in a different way and how it can be nurtured. We did publish our paper in International Journal of Psychology and International Journal of Intercultural Research. And it has been referred to, and that achievement goals vary across cultures. You can't use the same thing here. So this issue was challenged. I have just cited one case of achievement motive. Similarly, when J.B.P. Sinha, I think you must have heard his concept of nurture and taskmaster, which is a different kind of leadership style appropriate for Indian context. Now, there is another area which draws our attention about the notion of self. And there is a lot of work about interdependent and independent self, individualism and collectivism. All such ideas have been explored in cultural context. A lot of work is going on. A couple of students with me have undertaken research on this issue, and we found that, well, you can't categorize people as, interdependent and dependent. You have both the tendencies. They coexist. And they are present in Indians as well as Americans. We had a paper where we have compared American and Indian students. And we provided a tool which was very interesting in the sense that it was very unstructured. We simply asked them to write on small pieces of paper the characteristics they think that they have. Right? And then we did a few other things. I will share that paper to you for methodology as well as for the understanding of cultural differences in SelfConstrual. So it's very interesting to see how culture becomes an important factor. And you have to understand that what are its implications. Similarly, there are some examples in the area of stress. One of the concepts which has been studied at Allahabad is anasakti and how it relates to well-being and how stress is related to that. Now, people have been trying to explore that. Or in the area of personality, there are many people who have been studying alternative ways. And one of the notions which is of Indian origin, the Satto Guna, Rajo Guna, and Tamo Guna, which are very dominant ideas which are available in Ayurveda, which are available in Yoga Sutra, which are available in Bhagavad Gita. So in Indian ethos, the idea to think about it is very, very prominent. They are related to the properties which are quite varied. One of our students, Dr. Jitendra Singh, I think he may be invited in your program. He pursued this idea and very interestingly, in different studies, we have tried to see whether this is available in the Indian context, how well it describes the personality of Indian people. And it's very interesting to see that these three, and something very close to neuroticism, uh, quite adequately represented, but these three are quite dominant. Now, I have referred to these as illustrations of how things relate. If you go to the field of health and well-being, the classic book by Sudhir Kakkar on shamans, mystics, and doctors, which is quite famous now, it draws attention to the various practices which are available in life in different parts of India. So, if you go to health and well-being, if you go to the self processes, if you go to group life, if you go to many other things which are very important in life, you see that there is a cultural imprint. And if you go to the basic notion of existence, the significance of physical, non-physical, or spiritual becomes quite evident. And it becomes a very important source in life. Belief in God or performing bhakti. How you are going to rule out people who go for Kumbh even in this pandemic? People who go to Magh Mela, and crores of people go. You see how temples, they are very rich. You must be knowing the money which is available with, Sai temple and the Balaji and many others. And in Tirupati, many institutions are based on whatever is, given, submitted in worship to the Lord Vishnu there. Now, it's a very complex matter. It's not the question whether it exists or not. It's the matter whether you believe in it or not. It's the belief which is very important. You must read a book by a psychology professor. The name of the book is, I think, Mindset by Dweck. Mindset, it is by Dweck. And Dweck has posed a very interesting idea. I will share that with you. Many of you must have read about it. Still, you can enjoy. Dweck says, Carol Dweck, she says that whether you are intelligent or not intelligent, whatever intelligence you have, you may think intelligence as something which is incremental or whether it is an entity. Remember, incremental or entity. If you believe that it is entity, that like money, you have something in pocket, or your height which you have, your weight you have, which is fixed, which is not going to change. So if you are intelligent, you will remain intelligent in your life. You are good, you will remain good throughout your life. So entity theory is this, right? Fixed, static, unchanging. You may have this kind of belief. And the other is incremental, that it can change. It varies. So if I believe that intelligence is an incremental property or attribute, or intelligence is an entity, my whole approach will be very different. My actions will be very different. It is the belief which mediates belief as entity versus belief as incremental process. So incremental, and she has collected a lot of data, and here also some studies have been done. I think Dr. Arvind Mishra at JNU has taken up this issue. And recently I saw one of his doctoral students' work where this issue has been handled. So the point is that subscribing to entity theory or incremental theory is going to change your performance, going to change your behavior. So belief that I have a God who helps me, whether he is present, whether he is visible, or whether he is not visible, that's a different matter. That itself will help you and will improve your well-being. So it's the belief which is very important. And I think this can be elaborated in many, many ways. And there are many instances where this belief becomes very important. Politicians attack the belief. They try to change the belief. And they see the result of that. It happens. So these beliefs are quite important. If you look at the cultural roots, you will see that there are many things which we have not mapped, which we have not examined, and we have sidelined or marginalized those issues. They are not important. So majority of the psychology community that we have believes in the Western Euro-American psychological theories constructs. Our thoughts come from there. We read their articles, their books, new ideas, and all of them emerge in their own context, their own cultural context. So the import is still going on. But I see that now there is an interest in looking at the cultural context. So the future will depend on how we are addressing the issues within psychology. I have raised some of the issues in the beginning, that the whole scenario is going to change. And you have to look at the cultural context, which is in certain ways similar and certain ways different. It is very dynamic, it is changing. India of 1947 and India of 2021, you can't compare. There are so many things which have happened. There are things which are continuous. There are things which are discrete, which are quite varied, which are quite different. So I think the cultural context has no place in our list of variables. You don't appropriately incorporate that. At one level, you need to understand that broadly. And you can see how they can relate to or enrich our own understanding. I talked about belief and how belief is related to health and well-being. It also relates to social interaction, the interaction pattern which takes place, the social norms which are there. In the beginning, I mentioned also that psychology has a moving target. So whatever I am saying, it is not fixed. And you have to do at one time, then you have to again do it. Again, you have to look at it. For example, if you see the caste politics, the meaning of caste, importance of caste, how important it was and how important it is today, in which way, there is a lot of variation, lot of change which has taken place. So you can't treat them as fixed categories. If you have to relate to local conditions, local contexts, if you have to apply, then you have to recognize the local context and local, conditions, cultural context, which is very crucial. Only then you will be able to relate to that. So the future perspective needs at one level the paradigmatic challenges need to be understood, and one has to see how the different, as I have mentioned, observer dependent and observer independent, how these phenomenological categories are being converted into observer independent categories. There is no grammar for that. You can do anything. It's a big issue. It is up to you only how you are going to organize all these things. And you create a framework to follow that, you create measures and you do that. And if you are following one kind of methodology, it is accepted, fine. But to what extent it helps to explain? Now there is one very important question which comes to my mind and which is very important for the well-being of the people as well as well-being of the discipline. Doing research for the sake of research, publishing for the sake of publication is one way of doing things. To make a change, to give a positive direction to discipline, it is important to see whether all those perspectives are contributing to well-being or not. Not only well-being of the people, but the well-being of the entire creation, Srishti. It is important to see, and I want to emphasize this point, that the Euro-American psychology is predominantly a capitalist, consumerist, modernist perspective. It maintains one kind of human being. It gives you a perspective which is more concerned with the fulfillment of limited self. There is a book with the title, The Curse of Self. I often mention this, by Mark Leary. And he says that when self was discovered by people, ancient period, several thousands back, years back, and gradually how self has become a problem. Today, self has become a problem. You have anxiety, you have all the mental disorders, they are related to self and its functioning and its manifestations. The kind of self that we have accepted as reality is going to create these problems. You don't have any scope to look at the other models of self, which are quite inclusive. We don't have time, but if you look at the work of Anand Paranjape in Self and Identity in Modern Psychology and Indian Thought, you will find that, well, the Vedantic model tries to expand your scope. Or if you read Gandhi, who talks of Sarvodaya, who talks of Swaraj, he talks about self-control, self-regulation. And this earth, जहां आप रह रहे हैं, ये धरती, उसकी क्या डिमांड है आप पहचान लीजिए. So if everybody wants to have more and more and more and more, there is no limit to that. What is going to happen? Only conflict will take place. And if you think that this is my limited territory and I am this, but if yourself, the idea of yourself is porous, if others are included into it, you also pay attention to that. ये कहने की बात नहीं है वसुधैव कुटुंबकम. If you think that, well, this belongingness is there and it is an important issue for survival, I think it will provide a different model of social psychology. It will provide a different model of human interaction. And it will provide a different way to live in this world. So, the future of psychology will depend upon recognition. Punah pahchanana padega. We have to see the limitations as well as the opportunities. And simply borrowing things and following things, and they are just complicating. There are many reasons. Publish or perish, that is the rule. So you, in order to publish, you have to do something which appears different. It may be very similar, but it appears different. You have to put it like that. So a lot of effort is in that direction. So I think it is very, very important to realize these limitations. And in order to achieve the goal of quality of life, which is inclusive, which supports people, and which provides a kind of synergy. Synergy is one where different components work in cohesion. Sangachadvam sambadadvam, something like that. You facilitate the goal of the other, and the other person facilitates your goal. It's not something which is up to you. It is, a very bad situation in today's world where identities are the ways in which clashes are organized. The political, the religious, all kinds of identities are being exploited to fight. Psychology should provide a way where you have an identity which is very flexible, which allows others also to live, not only for your own life. So this person-centric existential perspective is problematic. I mean, you immediately say you are talking about dharma, you are talking about religion and Hinduism, but it is very important to see the possibilities. Unless you are able to do that, there is no future for humanity, no future for society. That's why, you have both the things. Identity clashes are there. At the same time, there are moves to create groups, small groups. Nations come together. There is globalization as well as separation. Both things are taking place. You need to create a balance between the two. It's the agenda for psychology in general. So the future course of psychology will depend upon realizing our limitations, improving in methodology, and creating an agenda which is more inclusive and relates to people, not only people, this earth. You need to relate to the whole context. I think an isolated person should not be taken as the goal of psychology. We have to rewrite its goals. These are important challenges before us. We have to prepare ourselves, and I think the conditions which are present in our environment, in society, everywhere, this need is being felt. I will stop here and I will invite some of the questions, observations that you have and try to address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for an edifying and illuminating session as you have highlighted on the topic at the acquaintance and ground level, mentioning the importance of psychology as it is a moving transient. So you have also emphasized on the role of mind and brain and in understanding psychological processes, which is the key ingredient in conducting any research in psychology, I guess. And I'm sure all aspiring researchers present in the participant will inculcate all these research techniques and ways of analysis in their upcoming research and papers. So, sir, with your permission, I would like to take some questions.
Sure, sure.
Yes. Okay, sir. So we have one question from Mr. Ritu Rajkumar. So he's asking, do we need to revisit all the psychological constructs and principles in light of our unique cultural contexts?
In the light of?
In light of our unique cultural contexts.
It's a tricky problem. It is tricky because if you analyze holistically, you will realize the limitations, and you may find that there are limitations and you need an alternative way to look at it. There is move towards cultural psychology, and there are important writings under the category of decolonizing psychology. There is feminist psychology, which is coming up in a big way. There are important publications on separate Chinese psychology, Filipino psychology, and many places people are trying. So this struggle is on. You know, the power of a paradigm which has been presented as an ultimate way to understand psychology and its issues has been accepted everywhere. It has been exported and imported, and it has been established. So I don't think immediately it is possible that you will throw everything and have an alternative. You need to respond to the needs, right? So it will take time. But if there is concerted effort, if you develop techniques, if you provide the alternative ways in therapy, in education, there are many issues, and you can see what are its implications. The office life that we have, how people work. If you look at our education system and the challenges that we have not studied adequately that what should be the adequate material to be learned in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all of us know that the bag is so heavy that parents have to carry that. And there was a national committee to reduce the weight of the bag. I'm giving an example that there are practical issues, even we are not open to that. So what should be taught at primary level, how that should be taught, that is a question for psychology as well as education both. We need to understand that. So what I'm saying is that we hardly bother about that. There is very little communication between education and psychology departments. There are many issues. Again, you see the compartmentalization that has taken place has created nuisance. The same problem may be studied in 3 different departments. So you spend time, energy, and everything. So, the culture of research and teaching itself is against innovations. You need to create a challenge. You have to take certain steps. Only then it will be possible. You know, it is only in the 6th survey that I have just published by Oxford University Press. There is a chapter on yogic psychology. And for the first time, there is a chapter on the concept of mind in psychology. There is a chapter on public psychology. Why I am citing this? I'm citing this because there are issues which have been ignored. So you can't in one go change everything, but you have to create awareness about the limitations, take steps. You can think of research issues and problems. You can incorporate the changes in your course curriculum. Let me mention that for the benefit of all the colleagues, that the learning outcome based curriculum framework, which has been created by the UGC and available on its website, the universities have to consider. And if you go there, you will see that we have incorporated a number of perspectives which are Indian, which relate to these challenges. So efforts are on, and you need to look at that. I think you must have seen this book, Psychology in Indian Tradition, by Paranjape and Rao, which has been published, and it is also by DK Publishers, which is at a low cost, which is available. There are many things which are available, or this book, Foundations and Applications of Indian Psychology. This is also available. So what I'm saying is that efforts are there, and I hope that wisdom will prevail, and we will develop a balanced view about what should be taught, how that should be taught, so that we contribute to the well-being of everyone.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for answering that question. Sir, another question we have from Dr. Sanjay Kumar Nayak, and he's asking, how do we construct a research in Indian context within its diversified culture? It is somewhat related to the previous question, but the kind of research method they have been asking.
Well, when you are using Indian and you want to be inclusive and have different subcultural groups and different reasons, I don't think it is possible to do that, to achieve that level of, efficacy is very difficult, number one. And I think it is the beauty of this diversity which should be analyzed and understood, and their implications should be looked at. There should not be imposition of one perspective over the other. So I think we need within India collaboration and understanding issues in different regions. And that will be a very positive step. And if this group is ready, we can make some effort where you take a problem and in your own region, in your own field, in your own locality, you can see what are the shades and what are the variations, what are the similarities, what are the differences, what are their implications. And there may be something to learn from one area to the other. I don't see the possibility to have same thing for everybody. India has so many languages which have very rich, literature and understanding and concepts. So I think that should be enjoyed, that should be shared. So I think one has to think in this way and utilize those resources which are available in different areas. And that sharing should be done. Right now, we hardly connect with each other. We hardly share the learning from one region or one area to the other. I think that will be more feasible way to, let us say, indigenize and to relate to our cultural context. Rather than thinking of doing one thing at national level and impose that everywhere, that will not be possible.
Okay, sir. Sir, एक दो सवाल और लेंगे. So the next
जरूर.
question, जी, sir, Dr. Seema Singh, she is asking, beyond the colonial mind, we have a deeper level, super transformative psychology to export. So are we ready or not for this?
I think we have to check with the colleagues who are present here. This readiness requires opening, mind. There are various obstacles, impediments that this is correct and this is not correct. We have accepted certain categories of thinking and we have to challenge that. We have to create open dialogue and think and see that if you provide this perspective, what are the advantages? How you are going to improve the quality of life? If you are able to do that, perhaps that will work. You must have heard about the term mindfulness training. Now, mindfulness, it is being accepted as a very important development. It is a development. There is, I think in 2020 or 21, one annual review chapter on mindfulness. So now it is accepted within clinical psychology and it relates to yoga. It relates to meditation. So I see the possibility that the transformation which Simaji is thinking about can come by this kind of dialogue, this kind of discussion, and this kind of engagement. Let us hope for better.
जी sir, एक और सवाल है अर्पिता पांडे जी का, and she is asking how mind is different from brain.
How mind is different from?
Brain.
How mind is
Brain.
Well, I don't have the final answer to this, right? We use the term mind in psychology to refer all the functions and there is no end to it. So the different functions taken together refer to mind. Brain is the physical apparatus that you have, right? So the emotions that you have, I want to use another word. I made a reference to observer dependent categories, phenomena, right? And one thing is that they emerge. Remember it. They emerge. Emerge means they take place. They are connected to your past experience. I have mentioned that you have sensory input, you have past experience, you have bodily sensations and the experience which emerges from your body. All the three are combined and this combination continues to take place because current experience will become part of your past experience, right? Next time you are a different person dealing with some kind of new input, so you will interpret it differently. It's a dynamic thing. So What is considered as mind is something else. Now I will say a few more words. An interesting idea. In Indian thought, Professor Ramakrishna Rao has talked about it in an interesting way in his book, and also in the chapter in the sixth survey. He says that the idea of mind or manas in Indian thought is something which is in between Atman and body. It is part of body. Manas, mind, is part of body. But, and the but is great but it has a unique property to get the reflection of Atman. I'm talking about a theory, a conceptualization. So it has membership to both the words. It is through mind that Atman relates to body. And it is part of body, but it reflects Atman. It's subtle, सूक्ष्म शरीर का हिस्सा इसको मानते हैं. Now there are other ways which have been, used in talking about mind. For example, if you go to Yoga Sutra, which is a very important text, and you have in the first sentence itself, chitta. कहते हैं ना योग जो है वो चित्त वृत्ति का निरोध है. योग चित्त वृत्ति निरोधा. And now it says, the second sentence is that if you have this nirod or restraint or control or regulation of mental functions, their chitta vritti is, again in next sutras they have explained it. If you withdraw it, then you will be in your own self. Now, mental functions, chitta, is another term which has been used. Many people further complicate that. They bring ahankar, buddhi, and chitta. So, buddhi is one which makes things, in this way, or that you take decisions. That is buddhi. Then there is another important notion about mind or manas, which is very, very interesting. और बड़ा मजेदार है. उसे कह के मैं अपनी बातें खत्म करूंगा कि this is something which has property to assume the property of the object to which it goes. आपका दिमाग जो है, आपका मन, आपका माइंड बड़ी तेजी से भागता है चीजों की ओर, वस्तुओं की ओर, अनुभवों की ओर. एंड जहां जाता है उसी का हो जाता है. अच्छी चीज आपने देखी और आपका मन लग गया उस पर. That's why in Bhagavad Gita it is said that it has to be controlled. And it can be controlled by abhyas, that is practice, that is yoga. And virakti, that is you do some kind of detachment. So mind regulation is the main problem of yoga. And if you regulate your mind, you can solve all the problems. So mind regulation, right, is something which is related to the various functions. If you are able to regulate your thoughts, if you are able to regulate your emotions, your activities, you will be able to achieve your goal. So practically, mind is related to, our mind consists of all these functions. How it is in action, all mind cannot be reduced to brain. This is important because mind has certain emergent properties which take place, which is available to you. It has its existence. It is not mere neural activity. So it is an abstraction, but it has reality. There are many, many things in our life which cannot be shown to you, but which are very important, which determine our behavior, action, personality, and everything. I will stop here. You need a separate lecture on mind.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of all the participants and the organizing committee, I will share my heartfelt gratitude. And thank you once again for accepting our invitation. और आपको हमेशा सुनना ऐसा लगता है कभी हमारी knowledge पूरी हो ही नहीं सकती, sir. So I hope to see you again in our coming sessions. Thank you, sir. Now I would request Dr. Tiwari, sir, to kindly present a vote of thanks formally.
Sir Pradhan, I would like to express my sincere thanks for your time and wonderful lecture. It is always refreshing as well as revisiting a particular topic and thinking in an innovative way after listening you anytime, anywhere. So it was like that again. So thank you so much for again a wonderful and great evening. Thank you so much, sir, on the behalf of organizing committee and Ramanjam College. I wish you all the best, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ashwini.